Good evening, everyone. This is Architecture, and welcome to the live stream. Today is June 20th, and this is a follow-up to the last live stream that I had, where I attempted to chop in Logic a break from scratch, and by scratch I mean from the source material, and build that into a jungle break. Well, since this last live stream, I've done my due diligence on how to better do this, because I've learned a lot since the last live stream. And what have I been doing since then? I've been reading manuals. Lots of manuals. So many manuals. A box full of manuals. Big old box full of manuals. I have been reading the manuals any which way I can, and also looking online, seeing how other people worked with it back in the day. And there was a clip that I recently found of BT working with Logic 6 back in around 2001, 2002, and that kind of gave me a lot of insights on how he was doing what he was doing back in those days. And so one of the features I never really dived into much with the older version of Logic is the sample editor that's actually built into the program. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So this is the main battle rig. This is the big behemoth TDM Pro Tool setup that I'm running. I have now two setups. This one is my sample editor. This is the Mac Quicksilver G4. A dual 1 gigahertz processor unit, and it has a single Pro Tools card in it, which allows me to use TDM effects. And I don't really need to have, I don't need it to be the powerhouse in my setup because I already have one. This is just to use TDM plugins and kind of basically be more like a focus sample editor station. And so what we're seeing right now is that display, and I'll show you what. One is a live capture from the direct source. This is a VNC grab from this machine right here. I don't have a second capture card yet for it, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work with it, but that is something I'll eventually get figured out. So this one will be a little bit more laggy compared to the other. Yeah, there. It doesn't look too bad right now, but if I start getting really crazy with it, you'll kind of see the difference between the two. So without further ado, I will get to the point here. And the last time we did this stream, we were working on the think break. And so the think break, I spent quite a bit of time with after the last live stream, using Logic 6 and kind of learning some of the other ways that we can do this. So first off, I'll boot up Logic on the main rig right here. It always kind of takes a minute to boot up because we're loading a crap ton of plugins on this one, about 210 last I counted. Okay, so this is booted up. Here's our environment. Let me switch displays real quick. There we go, that's better. Here's our main display over here. This is Logic 6. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to import a break. And that's under Options and Import Audio File. Now, one of the things I've learned about this process in the older versions of Logic, it's actually destructive editing. So you want to make sure you have a copy of what you're working on before you get really crazy with it. Otherwise, those changes that you make will be permanent. We'll go under Samples. We'll go under our Jungle Break section here. Here's our infamous think break that has like these weird pauses in between the source material. We'll just load that up real quick. So now we have imported the file successfully. Let's zoom in on it real nicely. Got to really, really zoom into this thing. I'm going the wrong direction. Here we go. You can see there's these weird dips in the file here, like right here and right here. These are things that will need to be fixed. And once you fix them, everything lines up pretty nicely. Now, one of the things I recently discovered the more I worked with these older versions of Logic is if you adjust the beats per minute, the timeline will adjust and you'll be able to kind of line things up pretty seamlessly. As seamlessly as it can be for a 20-year-old DAW program. Now, the first order of business is to make a duplicate copy of this. That way, when we get crazy for editing, we don't mess it up. And not in a way that we don't want to mess it up. Go into the audio window here. This shows us the active audio files in the session right now. We got the one. We're going to copy this file. Make sure you select it first. Then we're going to save this under Projects, Logic 6. And I've started a whole section of just break chops here. It's actually on my other drive here. There it is. Livestream choppage. Okay, we're going to call this our Think Harder break just because we're going to be silly and goofy. Save it. Change file reference to the song and the audio file that's been copied. Yes, we want to change it from our raw source. That way we can use it for another time and not totally screw it up later. How's it going, Bubs, Dahl, Bitterman? Welcome to the live stream. So we're going to change this file. So now we have switched to our new copy that we're going to do all of our edits to. And we're going to definitely make some big changes to this, and I'll show you how we do that. So if you ever wonder where your file is pulling from, you can just look real quickly here. It's going to say that it's pulling from SATA Max Storage, which is one of my SATA drives on this machine. It's one of my external ones that I can just change out as I need it. So we got our raw file right here. Make sure my channels are working the way they're supposed to, and we're going to preview the file. And already you can hear that drop in the break just kind of throws things off, and we're going to fix that real quick. It's going to ask us, do we want to create a backup of this? This is already the backup. So we're going to do as we wish with this. And we'll just proceed forward. Something that's also a good tip is to run the metronome to make sure how things are lining up. And since we're working on a DAA project and not a core audio or ASIO, we need to make a direct TDM channel so that we can hear the metronome. So real quickly, I'm going to pull that up in the environment window. Go into audio. Find an auxiliary port here. The session. Switch it over from DAE to direct TDM, which is basically takes the native end of Logic and then runs it through the DAE TDM side of things. Bear with me here. That might not be totally correct. Might need to make another aux channel, actually. So I'm going to create another audio object here. And then we're going to add auxiliary 3. Make it a stereo object over here. And then we're going to add an ESP instance, which is going to be our bridge between the native side to the TDM side. Since I only need a metronome, I'm just going to select outputs 1 and 2. Keep it really simple for that matter. And let's see if this plays real quick. Okay, so now we can hear the metronome. And now it's totally off base. So we need to fix that. So first part's looking good. I've kind of noticed that this one's always been kind of coming in late. I mean, we can get, depending on how anal retentive you want to be, we could get BT levels of anal retentive here and just like make everything frame accurate. But this is jungle. This is not, I'm not making what he's making today, so we're going to just go for what vibes the most. See if this still lines up. So I'm noticing that this file is starting to kind of lag a little bit right here. Might not be totally a problem. But we also have this spot right here. I'm going to cut that out real quick. And kind of the big thing that we're listening for is to make sure that the metronome is at least working with the rest of the elements enough so things will kind of tighten up the more you speed up the sound. So if there's a little bit of syncopation at this point, it's okay. You don't want too much syncopation as you're speeding things up further because it might become more problematic down the road. Okay, I've eliminated that spammer there, so hopefully that cleans up the chat room a little bit. We don't want to be like totally on grid, just enough on grid that things still work, but yet still have groove and soul. I mean, it really depends on how anal retentive you want to be, and if you're anal retentive and producing jungle, well, that's usually kind of a bad mix. So we kind of need to loosen up just a little bit. So I think we're looking fairly decent here for a start. Is there any audio quantization in Logic 6? I'm still reading the manual on this. There may be, but for what I saw BT doing, he did all of this kind of the way I'm doing it. And one of the other things that you can do here, like I'm just going to say, for example, here's a section that I've selected here, and there's what's called time and pitch machine. And this is kind of Logic's built-in time stretch and pitch shift method of making things kind of stretch one way or the other. We're going to use this feature a little more in depth later, and I'm going to get further into it. You can actually, the way BT was doing this, he was actually flexing individual sections. And it does have a BPM detection, and it will try to like match whatever you have, like roughly. It's a feature that I'm still kind of like getting a feel for how it works. I think flex time came a bit later. This is kind of like in the land before flex time. We basically are the flex time you as the person operating the DAW in this case. So I'm pretty happy with where this is lining up now. If you exit out of here, it's going to ask, do you want these to be permanent changes? And since I have designated this to be a permanent changed file, that's a yes. So now we've committed those changes. And unlike most modern DAWs where it's non-destructive editing, we are doing destructive editing here. And that's kind of something you have to remember. I have to remember that sometimes as I'm really diving into a project, into a file, using this method of workflow, that everything is kind of like half destructive, half not. It's just a matter of like remembering, am I doing a destructive edit or am I doing non-destructive? Always good to remember that when you're working with these older platforms, because you don't want to ruin your source material doing that. So now we got what we got. I am going to start by taking my first part right here, and I'm going to cut it at the second measure. And I'm actually going to drag the rest of it over to audio 2. And I'm going to leave it muted for a second, because one of the things that we're going to do, I'm just going to play this real quick. The yeah, no, whoo. I'm just going to cut that out and just kind of give us a kind of a clean break. I like those sounds in the jungle production, but let's say we want a clean break reference. Like we just want the drums. We don't want anything else. You might get a little bit of residual stuff, but that's okay. But we just kind of we want drums. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take from the second measure and the first measure and just kind of like cut those out. And we'll jump into that here. Get zoomed in real quick. Get this quickly lined up. You can see that this one's kind of like, so what mouse am I using? I am using, this is the mouse I'm using for this machine. I actually have two mice. Well, can't really see it from this angle, but I have two mice, one for the sample editor. This is the keyboard for it. And I have another keyboard and mouse down here. That's a one button. The one that's for the sample editor is a two button and a wheel. And the main one is a one button official Apple mouse. So as you can see right here, let's make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see it. I'm kind of on a squish display right now because I am dual screening two machines, one's slightly squished because it's outputting full HD. The other one's at a 4:3 ratio right now. So I'm kind of having to work with a squished display and a not squished display side to side. So right here we're at the first measure and we're kind of in the third beat of it. Get our scissor tool, we're going to chop here. And then chop over there. Actually, that's the third beat. I'm getting my subsections kind of mixed up here. I need to look at the legends at some point so I can remember for myself what I'm trying to describe here. So let's play that section real quick. So now we're just going to switch tools. Delete these elements. We might even be able to use this shaker part right here real quick. Let's see how that works. Okay, we're going to see how this splice works. It's a little bit skippy there. Let's try from this section. And since we're pulling from pretty much a relatively like similar region on the second measure, things should be fairly lined up when we splice and nudge them over. And I got a feeling this one's going to work a lot better than the other one. Let's see how this works. That was good. I like that. We're keeping that. So one of the things I've kind of done in my practice sessions is that part right there. I like to kind of add another kick and a snare real quick. Just got to, and that kind of just helps the break kind of roll a little bit for that section. So with that said, I think I might just duplicate this one right here. I liked where this one lined up. I kind of find that if a element kind of comes a little bit later rather than sooner, it kind of works better. I'd rather have a late snare than an early snare. When things kind of come too early, then it's just like, well, that was unexpected. When it's late, it's like, okay. You just kind of got to get a feel for the individual break that you're working with and just kind of like respect the nature of its existence. Well, first of all, let's get this section looping properly, and then we can just... So we actually, what we could do is we could actually put a kick right where that this snare is right here, and it would give us our boom chunk. Do Command C and then do a Command V over here. See how that works. Maybe if we shifted that last snare just slightly over. But then we have this section right here that we need to fill in the gaps with. So going back to our second and third measure down here. Let me go into the edit mode screen for that one real quick. Gonna take a quick section over here, and we're gonna time stretch it to kind of like just give it a slight nudge in the other direction, because we just need a slight nudge that way. So we're doing our own flex timing here. So I did a little bit of a time stretch there to kind of slow that section down, make it slightly longer. And now this lines up a bit nicer than it did previously. So that you can already see that this really lines up a lot better than it did previously. Yeah, look at that. See how much better that lines up now? So this should be a little more in time than it was previously. Get our scissor tool. We're going to cut that section. And while we're at it, maybe we'll do another cut just to kind of see what works best. We don't really have a full beat to fill here. We just need to fill in a section, which I think is about right here. And let's just see how this now sounds. Rolls pretty nicely. Not hearing any jank. At least not jank I want to remove, so I'm pretty happy with the jank of where this is at. So now we've done those chops. Pretty happy. We're just going to leave those elements there in case we decide to come back and make another batch of it. So we've now taken the raw think break in a super jank format with dropouts and loads of imperfection. And we've basically made the foundation of what's going to be our jungle break. So now that we've made all the splices, what I like to do next is I like to condense all the edits down into a single measure break, which is what we're going to do next. So what we do is we go to the environment window once again. The Valley of Deep Shadow, as some may call it. We find our output, and because of this behemoth system, we have 56 freaking ins and outs on this machine right now. So all we need is the first two outputs. That's why I got the simple machine just for focused edits for the most part, but I like the way the display works on this one, so we're using the big behemoth to do this part of the work. So without further ado, we're going to bounce this. We're going to do this as a mono file because for whatever reason, Pro Tools TDM really liked to think of each individual channel as a mono channel, not a stereo channel. That's one of the other things you have to adjust from in the modern world, is that when it talks about 64 audio channels, it means monophonic mono audio channels, not stereophonic, like you would with a more modern DAW. So always good to remember that if everything was stereo, it would be 32 stereo channels and 64 mono. So always a good thing to kind of remember when you're working in these old school workflows. Just remember that. So now we've set our output to mono. Make sure everything's playing from the correct output. And then we bounce. So it's going to ask you what your file format is. You have Sound Designer 2, AIFF, or WAV. Everything we're doing today is 16-bit, so we're going to keep it 16-bit. You can do dithering. Not in my BT OCD mood right now. We're just in a jungle mood, so we're going to lay caution to the wind, and we're going to bounce and add this to our project. And we're going to call this Think 113, just so we remember that this is the bounced version at 113 beats per minute. And then we're going to go back to the sample editor once we get it brought in back into the setup. So save as Think 113. So now the file has been successfully bounced, and now we go back to the audio window where we'll see that it has been loaded right here. And here it is. Here is the finished product that we just worked on. Look at that, all nice and clean without all the chop marks from the previous section over here. So now we can successfully mute this, preview it. I'm pretty happy with that for today's session. Now we're going to stretch this to about 160 beats per minute. And the way that we can do that in Logic without taking it into another program, we're going to go right back into our sample editing window here. And here it is in all its glory. We're going to go to time and pitch machine. And so right here, you'll see there's the tempo section right here. The original is 113. We're going to change this to 160. And the transpose is in semitones. And I believe 100 semitones is one semitone. So I typically like to pitch this one up about 2 to 3 semitones, which is going to be about 300 semitones. Using our handy-dandy keyboard, we're going to put in 300. I could do the pre-listen on this, but it's not going to sound quite the way it's supposed to. It's going to sound a lot faster than that, and I'll show you what that actually sounds like. But actually, before we do this, I just remembered we need to back this file up because it's like this is now our source jungle break, so we don't want to make permanent changes to that one. So we're going to save a copy, and then we're going to call this Think 160. See, I almost forgot, and I would have changed the source format again. So Think 160. Think wave. We'll make it a WAV file so that everyone can play it back on comfortably on whatever platform. You don't have to have a Mac or Logic to play it back. So press save. This should now be. No, we got to re-import it now. It's create backup, save section as. Oh, it gets kind of. Oh. I just remembered. I've been doing nothing but reading manuals for like the last week on how to use this older stuff. It's been a lot of information to like jam into my head in a short period of time, and that's basically what my live stream has now become, is just trying to like gather as much information as I can before the show. That way I can at least halfway talk about a half-witted idea of what I've learned so far, and this is where I'm at. And so at some point I'll get back to making full-fledged tracks. While I am in this learning phase, I just kind of have to bear with it during this learning process. There's been so much to learn, and I'll get more into that after we get moving here. So going back to the audio window, we have this is our source break now after all the chops. So go to audio file, and then you go to copy and convert files. We're going to promptly rename this Think 160 because we're going to speed this up significantly. It's a WAV file, original type and original format, 16-bit. Save it. We're just going to replace it. And then we're going to change the track it references. And when you do it this way, you're not going to run the risk of overwriting the wrong file. And this is where things will get fun and interesting. Okay, it froze there for a second. I was going to get a little nervous if it did, but we're still in the game. Perfect. Cool. All right, going back into our file here, we're going to go to time and pitch. Going from 113 to 160 beats per minute. 3 semitones up or 300 semitones. We're going to process and paste this. Don't need to make a backup file because we just did. And just like that, it has done the time stretch. And I actually find it to be, well, you be the judge. You let me know how the sound is. We've now set the DAW to 160 beats per minute. Now let's see how this thing actually sounds. Now, bearing with us that this is a 1-bar sample, of course it's going to get a little bit repetitive, but that's where the next stage of choppage happens, and that's where we actually put this into a sampler and get even crazier with it. But before we do that step, we need to do another thing, which is the time stretching in a more Akai-like fashion. So that's our good source break at 160. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can do this. We can either send it to our sampler rig, send it to the Akai S3200, and sends it back. That's a proper Akaizer method. But I'm feeling a little lazy today. I don't want to do that. Well, what are my other options on OS 9? Well, the other night, which was last night, I discovered in my collection of TDM plugins, there's this plugin called Pitch and Time. And now what Pitch and Time is was a DSP-powered time stretch plugin that was made for Pro Tools. So going back to our audio window, we are going to take our Think 160 break, and then we're going to copy and convert, and then we're going to call this the Timestretched file, which I just typically do is I just put a TS at the end of the file. It's a way I can work fastly. I know what it means. And then we're not going to change the file that's referenced in this case, but we are going to add this back into the project. So go to where it's located, break chop sessions, Livestream choppage. Okay, it doesn't work that way, but we're going to get out of this, go into Audio 4, and then we're going to import it this way. It will recognize it going this way. Break chop sessions, Livestream choppage. And so basically it's a duplicate of the one that's on Audio 3, but we're going to do more wild and crazy things to the next file. So without further ado, let's jump back into our lovely sampling editing window. And so one of the cool things I just finally got working last night, and after 2 weeks of like digging and looking for why my Audiosuite plugins were not working in Logic, I found out that what you have to do if you're going to use Logic with Pro Tools hardware, you got to run DAE 5.1 and no higher, not 5.1.3. And I was running 5.1.3 and was getting nothing but grief and heartache on anything else other than Pro Tools. So with this change, we are fully back up and running with being able to use all of the Pro Tools features on different platforms before DigiDesign got too much like DigiDesign later on in history. So now we're going to look for our plugin in our massive pile of TDM plugins, which is going to be Pitch in Time 2.0. Here it is. And so what Audiosuite is, it's the destructive version of TDM. Basically, it leverages. So here it has recalled itself right here. And typically what I do with my Akai samples for time stretching is I basically do a 200% stretch. So right now we're set at 100. It took me 2 weeks to figure this out. Being able to press that preview button and actually hear something without getting a bunch of random 4-digit error codes, wondering what is this? What does it mean? Like, what do I do about it? I finally found an answer after weeks of word searching for the problem. There was a post from like 2002 that finally gave me the light, and I was able to finally figure that out. So that's basically what our original sounds like. Now we're going to take that up all the way to 200%. Actually, we need to go the other way. It's a little counter to the way I would typically do it. So we want a 50%, which is like a 200% stretch. So here's what this sounds like. It's not as grainy as the Akai time stretch. But needless to say, it's an interesting stretch that I think is still jungle-ish enough to work for what we're doing today. So I'm pretty happy with where that's at. Test some of these features real quick. I just got this up and running last night, so I'm still learning the ropes of it. I'll figure out that feature later. So 50% stretch, or we're going to play it at 50% speed, which is a 200% stretch. Then preview it just to make sure one last time. And then we're going to process this. And so now we have destructively overwritten the file. Now it is going to forever be in this time-stretched fashion. And so one of the big things that BT did back in his early productions was he basically did Audiosuite in Logic, just like I'm doing, and just would just do bacon after bacon after bacon after bacon effects. And that was one of the ways a lot of these era productions were done, is not everyone had the ability to do these things in real time. So what you would do is you basically copy the file, destructive edit, and if you went too far, you would have to either have hoped that you had saved a previous version before the last edit, or be able to undo far back enough to get back to where you're at. It's not like you can just take the plugin, delete it, modify it. You're kind of having to have commitment to whatever that sound's going to be. So there's that. So really all that's left to do at this point is we're going to take our unstretched think break, the stretched one, put them together, save it, chop it in recycle, and then re-upload that into ESX24. And it's going to ask you one more time, are you sure you want to make this permanent? The answer is yes. So all we're going to do is just drag that over to the start of the second measure on audio channel 3, zoom this out a bit, capture our 1, 2, 3 bars of a break now. That 1 bar has now become 3 because the time stretch. Play this all together. So there we have that. Now we're going to go back into the Valley of Deep Shadow, also known as the Logic Environment window. Scroll all the way over to the output that we're actually using, which is 1 and 2. Go to bounds. Make sure that the start and end positions are exactly where you're going to want it to be. We're saving as a wave in 16-bit. We're jungleless, we're not dithering. And we're going to, once again, bounce and add. And then we're going to call this Think 160 NTS. That way we know that this is the combined file. And then we can reload this into recycle. Do the edits that we're going to do. I'm going to free up my screen real estate here. I'm not going to use this other setup today. We're using the full-fledged beast for this session. That's a whole nother workflow. I'm still ironing out the bugs. First of all, make sure that this is saved. Yep. Okay, that is saved. Get myself to one screen real quick. Okay, now I am on one display. That looks the way it does to me. I'm not working with this squished version. I have the one where it needs to be. Oh, that's so much nicer than it was. Okay. Get out of the valley of deep shadow, go back to our session, audio window. And now, if everything worked as it should bring back the combined file. And just to make sure everything's there. That looks like the file that we made. And I think before I send this over into the next stage, which is going to be recycle, I want to normalize this file. So I go back to functions. We're going to go to normalize. And then it's going to ask, are you sure you want to normalize it? And basically what that does is, you'll see what this looks like here in a second. It basically takes a lot of section, moves it up to about the highest threshold, about 0 decibels. And that way, when you're working in 16 bits, you kind of want your sound to be as loud as possible, which is kind of counter to the way that we do things in the 24 and 32-bit environments, because you're competing with a very small window of headroom, which is about 96 decibels versus the almost infinite of 32 and 64-bit. So that's just one of the... that's something I had to learn to undo in my own thinking when I was coming from tape to DAW in the mid-2000s. Was I wanted to record everything hot because that's just the mentality I had. Now, while that's true with the samplers, we don't really want that with the DAW end of things, clipping the analog to digital inputs there. So that was a bit of a ramble. Let's just see how this sounds real quick. Now that I kind of listen to this stretch, now it kind of sounds like a 240p YouTube video sound quality stretch, which it doesn't quite sound like a high time stretch, but I think for our intents and purposes, I'm just kind of curious to see where this goes. So it vibes enough for what we're doing. I'm happy with that. So we're going to save the session. I just realized I didn't save this session during this entire 15 minutes I've been doing this so far. So let's get this as Think 160 and TS. Okay, everything's saved. The session's saved. Now we're going to reload this file into recycle. And it's going to ask, do you want to make that normalization permanent? The answer is yes. We don't have commitment issues because we're working in this style of production. So with that said, now we got to boot up recycle. And so we just got to find the sample where we stored it. Go to our... So that's the original one that we started with after we did our chops. That's the fruits of our labor. Get that all nice and zoomed in. And we're going to say, we're going to tell recycle this is 3 bars. And it shows 160.024, which honestly, that's good enough for what we're doing here. It's good enough for jungle. Go into process, and we're going to Command G, show ourselves what the grid looks like. We're going to add the slices at the grid, and I'm just going to do my traditional, tried and true quarter note chops here. In some cases, I could do an 1/8 note chops, but that just means I have more files to manage later. And when you're working on a hardware sampler, that just gets to be a bit cumbersome. So I like to simplify that as much as I can when I'm working old school. Now, something that I do as a part of my break making process is those time stretch parts. I alternate between playing it at this level of stretch, and I actually bring it back up, which is like a whole octave up to like basically a whole octave, and then I basically those chops, quarter note chops, become 1/8 note chops. So I'll show you what that looks like here in a second after I save this file. So we got the chops where we want it. We're going to save as. We're just going to save it as a Rex file because we're ESX24 in Logic at this time could just natively load this up into its sampler, and this, you'll see what this looks like in a second. I could describe it forever. So here it is. We got our name. Let's add the extension to the name so it doesn't confuse it with any other file types. The file is saved. We can quit out. And now we can hop back into the DAW, which is Logic. Got to load up all 210 plugins again. Now that's one of the things I noticed when BT was working with his old setup. Was he had Reason and Logic, but for whatever reason, Reason wasn't playing nicely together, so he had to load them separately like this. So I didn't feel quite so alone in me having to cycle through apps like this. You got to remember, this is Mac OS 9. This is not modern day OS X. And Core Audio was not yet a thing, just yet. Could reload our... Actually, take that back. We're just going to kind of start with a new session here. Start fresh. Go into the Valleys of Deep Shadow. And for auxiliary 1, we can make that a stereo source. And we're going to add an ESX24 instance in this case. Yes, so Bitterman's asking, Apple, you mean Core Audio? This is all before Core Audio actually existed. 9.2 was the last version of Mac OS to not have Core Audio. That was something that came later with OS X. And so in this case, we're actually working with DAE, which is DigiDesign's audio engine platform, which is another fancy way to say TDM. So we're on Pro Tools drivers here. We're not even using ASIO in this case, which is what Mac OS 9.2 gave you the option to do. I'll just give you a quick show of what I'm talking about here. So you go into hardware and drivers. Mac AV was kind of like your built-in sound if you didn't have a sound card. If you had kicked out the coin for a sound card, you had ASIO here. If you had the Korg 1212 interface, it had its own special drivers. And eMagic had their own, which was the makers of Logic, which was audio work. I don't know what STUDIO is. Not familiar with that one, or EASI. DirectTDM is basically that bridge driver that takes the native Logic stuff and marries that to the TDM thing. So there's some pros and cons with that. You get to leverage the CPU, what have of you there. The only limitation is you can only use 8 mono channels, 4 stereo channels. It's basically like an 8-bus section of your mixer that just routes it into the TDM side. But ESX24 is full TDM, so we are fully utilizing the TDM side of things with ESX24. So now if I've quickly ran through and described that, we're going to go into the edit window here, recycle convert, and we want to extract the sequence and make a new instrument. And here's our break. And here's the chops right here. And as always, make sure that you load the sample into ESX24, just like this. And make sure the BPM of your sequencer is correct. So Command 6 will give us the this style of display. If you just click on it directly, it'll give you the musical notation, which is all cool and dandy. And it's, if you know music notation, that feature is great. I wish I knew it better than I do, so I used the piano roll, and that in this version is Command 6. So always kind of good to remember that in your muscle memory. Welcome to the stream, Analog Rich. I'm glad you're able to make it. This is kind of getting towards the tail end of our session, but glad you're here. You'll be able to kind of see what we did in the previous section where we took the raw breaks and then we chopped them up into our main break, did a time stretch section using Audiosuite plugins, and now we have gotten to the final stage of this, which is basically importing it into the sampler and kind of starting our chop work. So, move my screens around so everyone can see what's going on here. First thing I'm going to do is I like to set my pitch wheel to. So my set schedule is typically about 6:30 Mountain Standard Time. I'm not sure what time zone you're in. It's currently about 7:26 in my time zone. So typically about an hour before is when I usually start these on Thursdays. I'm trying to get better about finding the best way to let everyone know what my schedule is. That way more people can be a part of it. Still very much in the learning stages of how I'm doing this whole setup. Every stream so far has kind of been like an experiment. So without that said, going back to our break. Oh, and just before I was hop back over here, make sure our pitch has been set to pitch wheel or pitch bend. And so everything set all the way up to an octave up. I haven't got to work an octave down quite the way I want to yet. That's still going to need some troubleshooting. And so I'm going to save this as kind of our raw ingredients here. I'm going to make a copy of it, take it back. Okay, that did not do what I wanted it to. Okay, there we go. Perfect. We're going to put that one to the side, use it as our reference file. Might have accidentally deleted some things from this. Man, 6, all right. Not to worry, because everything's a quarter note chop, I didn't really lose much. And just like that, we've reconstructed that portion of it. Take our velocity tool, bring those up. Well, congratulations, Connor, on getting the CD33000 XL. That's a good model to have. It's both Mac and Windows compatible for Akai Mesa, so you're able to leverage both platforms if you wish. That one, I typically prefer Windows because it's a lot easier to work with, and I have like a huge library of sounds in Akai Mesa Windows format, so I like to use Windows for that one. And that'll be a video at some point. Just help someone get Akai Mesa working on Windows 10 today, and I'm reminded by just how challenging that is, and I really need to sit down and make a video for everyone of what that's like from start to finish, because there's just so many variables in between the whole setup process. And that's actually the source of my Akai Mesa files was I got some of those same 90s sample CDs and converted those ISOs into Akai Mesa format, which for one gives me the ability to real-time preview the samples before I load them, And I get to load it with the program and sample information just like it would be like a standard Akai file. So you get the benefits of PC storage, but yet Akai readability. I don't have to rebuild programs and figure out what the key groups were. So everything's saved in a PC recognizable format. It's kind of the best of all worlds, really. The biggest pain is the whole setup process. So now we're gonna do some playing around here in this section right here. I'm gonna not so I don't try not to get lost in too many screens here. See how this sounds. So if you watch this stream earlier, as soon as it ends, you'll see exactly what I did. Is I basically worked in the sample editor window. I don't have it on loaded right now, but as soon as the stream's over, you'll get to see what that looks like from start to finish. We started this at the very beginning of the stream. So one of the things I like about YouTube is these are archived. So if people want to watch it later, they can watch it later from start to finish. And that's kind of why I've taken to the YouTube format, is for that automatic backup and being able to share what's been recorded at this point. As you can tell, that stretch is very subtle. It just basically goes from like full quality wave to like a 240p YouTube stream from 2006. That's what I can describe what this sounds like right now. So yeah, we basically made this break from scratch from the source material, and that's basically what the stream is about, is taking a raw break and making it into a jungle break with time stretching. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do what I typically like to do is I like to do a octave pitch up on the time stretch. And for that, we're going to go into hyperdraw. It's going to ask you what MIDI channel, and we want the pitch bend parameter. It's going to be kind of hard to see. They chose this bright blue and bright red little line. Very 90s-like design choice here. Maybe there's a way to change this at some point. But I'll figure that out after the stream. So let's just see how this sounds real quick. Make sure this works. And so because we did that, we need to take these right here and make our quarter note and eighth notes, because we're basically doing double time on these. Copy that and put more over here. Check this out. Not quite the same tonal quality as our Akai time stretch, or a Kaiser for that matter. This was kind of one of the experimental parts of the show, as I just discovered this plugin last night called Pitch in Time. It was a Pro Tools TDM plugin that was like its own kind of time stretching thing. I thought it sounds kind of interesting enough. And now it just, I'm not sure if I'm going to use that for future productions exactly just yet, but it was at least an interesting experiment to see how it was going to work. Because the only way I can really use a Kaiser is to use my legitimate Akai as my Kaiser in this workflow if I was to keep it period correct. D. Carmichael 00 brings up the question, why do you think Cubase has such a cluttered UI UX compared to other DAWs? I'm glad you said that, because I find modern Cubase to be very much that way, very much confusing. Like, what am I looking at? And this is someone who's worked extensively with Cubase 3 on Atari and VST for Mac and PC. And it seemed like ever since SX came out, like it just, everything I knew from the previous versions was just like totally different. Like it just feels like I'm learning a new DAW, honestly. And I can't, if with version 3 on Atari and VST, it just felt like this feels like any other DAW. I feel like I get this. And then I just feel like they just got really complicated once they combined their new window platform with it. I know it's very powerful. It does great things. Right now, I'm trying to learn old school Logic. I got to pick my battles where I can. And at some point, I'll learn Pro Tools 5, which, once again, this is just one half of the manuals I have for it. Here's the other half. And that's not including the Logic manual, which is like 1,000 pages for the reference manual plus its own TDM section. Yeah, I'm seriously sending myself back to DAW school, doing this entire series in preparation for my This Old DAW series. And so I'm really wanting to do this deep dive into the old school workflows, how they actually did this stuff. So what computer am I using? I am using a Mac G4 here. Let me see if this camera's working real quick. Switch displays real quick here. So here's my point of view. So I'm using a Mac G4 with a dual processor, 1.42. About the fastest you could have gotten stock from Apple at this time to run OS 9. And this is the Behemoth TDM Rig that I'm running. This gives us 56 channels of audio in and out. And right now we're just using the 1 and 2 from the 888-24. I could do a whole section on this whole section of my rack. The 882 is connected to my sample editing one, which is the Quicksilver dual processor, 1 gigahertz. If you go down this route, you want to make sure you have a word clock. And this is the word clock I use. It takes both super clock and word clock, which is what the Ferrofish uses. Pro Tools is on super clock and basically synchronizes these things together. If you don't have this set up, you'll get a lot of pops and clicks the more you expand. So I'm going to switch displays again. D. Carmichael 00 says that he remembers stories of the era where producers would ship their own TDM systems to whatever studio they were working in. And so you have to remember just that's kind of a profound statement when you think about like they'd ship this entire Behemoth setup. And so what's in that case below is the expansion chassis. In the expansion chassis you have your TDM cards. That's where the brains of the rig reside. It all has a single cable and card that goes back into the G4 here. And those 2 green lights are my SATA drives. That's my removable storage. Each one's about half terabyte each. So I have about 1.5 terabytes in this machine right now, which for a machine from 2002, that's a good amount of storage when you consider these machines had 40 gigabytes stock. Switch displays again. So Vitamin says, let's throw a pad on this. And I agree. We're going to throw a pad on this. So there's our little break that we have at the moment. And so what I like to do for pads in Logic is undoubtedly using ES2. Now, how do we do that in the TDM environment? Well, let's just hop over quickly here. We're going to need another aux channel for ESB. Let's see if I can remember this right. We're going to make a new audio object. Get set to DTDM. And what do we want this to be? We want this to be an instrument because we're kind of on the other side of things. Call up an ES2 instance. And we're going to use this Fat Pad JV. I was kind of playing around with this earlier. And I think I already have an ESP instance running in this. Or actually, no, that was the last session. I need to respool another instance of that. So what we want to do is we want to go back to the DAE. You got to keep all this stuff straight when you're working this way. It's just like trying to keep all this crap straight. Let's go back over to the TDM side. Make yet another. Okay, sorry. Bear with me here for a second. I'm doing mental gymnastics in real time. Create another audio object. And we're going to assign this to an auxiliary. And we're going to do 3 and 4. And we're going to want that to be a stereo, so that's going to take up aux 3 and 4. Now we're taking over aux 3 and 4. We're going to want an ESP insert to bridge over the native side of things. And we're going to tell it to go to outputs 1 and 2. And we're going to go back to our ES2 instance and just verify that we are actually hearing things. All right, what am I not doing? Oh, I know what I'm not doing. I probably need to make we need to make a range channel for that. So let's go over back to the Valley of Deep Shadow. Got to select this element here. And we are going to go to the arrange, track, create. Okay, not what I wanted, but I think we can make this. Can we make this work? I don't want that. Maybe I can just take this one over real quick. Go to DTDM. Instrument 1. Okay, this should do it. Okay, we got sound. And because I'm in an especially lazy mood today, I'm going to fire up the Alpha Juno to use that as our chord generator. Because it has chord memory. You know, now that I think about it, I think I've used this sound before in my 2022 G3 laptop jungle track. That sounds very similar to the pad I used. And it was an ES2 pad, so that would make sense. The crackle you heard was actually my mixer. It's specifically channel 32 on this desk. My desk needs some servicing, and every time... That is the Alpha Juno that you sold me, Thought Forms. Thanks for making it to this live stream. This is the Alpha Juno you sold me 2 years ago. And I am using it as chord memory for my ES2 and Logic 6 on this behemoth TDM platform. Except the ES2 is just running off of data processing right now. So see what this full measure or 4-bar thing sounds like. Command 6 that real quick. Ooh, looks like might have some overlap there. We'll make sure we mute that real quick too. Oh, that's what we gotta do. We gotta bring that back down here just real quick. And 64 should be, let's see how that transitions over. I like that. Good enough for what we want to do. Probably bring down the volume on this pad real quick. So people are asking when I do my streams. It's typically Thursday, 6:30 Mountain Time. I do have a Discord channel where I try to keep everyone in the loop there on streams and stream ideas. So if you're wondering when my streams are, you can always guarantee it to be on a Thursday at 6:30. That's kind of my reserved time slot. If it happens at any other time, that's just because I found an opening in my schedule to do it. So I'm just going to take this 4-bar break, make it an 8-bar break, and then we're just going to kind of lay down some of these variations on core memory. So we're going to make that 8 measures. Command C, Command V. Why did I post it up there? I don't know. It's probably because I had it previously selected, but without ado, let's lay down that pad. Okay, so bear with me here for a second. I have to make the MIDI channel that is assigned to the instrument, and that's what I forgot to do. So I'm not actually running the TDM side quite yet, but just to keep true to that, let's call up a TDM instance right now, and then we're going to pull up. So just real quick, this is our TDM DSP usage right now. It's pretty underloaded right now. Not really using it. The ESX24 is currently taking up a slot. It's kind of funky how it works. It's just basically like a direct channeling into the TDM side. We do have the Access Virus plugin. I'm still kind of getting my head around that one. It sounds great, but I kind of pre-planned this session with ES2. I'm rambling, but going. Let's get that TDM effect on the break right now. And I'm thinking a compressor would work really good for that. And we got quite a few options. Let's go with the tried and true Renaissance compressor from Waves. So this is the Renaissance compressor running off the TDM platform. And Thoughtphones is saying, if you understand TDM, basically it's that you're offloading the plug-in power to a DSP chip, and you're 100% correct. That's exactly what we're doing here. And so instead of taking CPU power, we're taking DSP power, which is based on Motorola chips. And as you can see right here, this one compressor is taking up 27% of this one DSP chip. Each card has 6 DSP chips. And so you see how each 6 DSP chips per card are laid out here. And we have 4 cards right now. By the end of this week, I'll have 8 mixed cards and 2 sample solo cards. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to be like in the session. I've been doing nothing but reading manuals for like 2 weeks and just like deep diving like all the digital design forums from like 20 plus years ago to figure out how to get this stuff working. Let's get that MIDI channel pulled up for the pad real quick. Okay, I think this should work right. Let's see what happens. We're just laying down the pad real quick. Got some weird overlapping happening right now. Let's see. All right. Just need to shorten this up real quick. So what I prefer is a compressor. If I'll be fully honest, I'm not sure yet. It's still very much an experiment for me every day. Am I still muted? Shows it's connected on my end. Is everyone still able to hear me, or is? How about this? Does this sound better? Are you able to hear me like this? If just someone could give me a thumbs up that this is coming through, okay? Okay, everyone's perfect. Thought we lost connection here for a second. Perfect, cool. Whew. That's the thing about live streams. This is live. This is actually happening. We are all in real time here. There's no studio edits here. This is coming stream of conscious from me to you and everyone else watching this stream. Okay, we're back in business. I think we need an 808 bass now. And I think I might see what the Access Virus TDM plugin has to offer us. So back into the Valley of Deep Shadow, also known as the environment window. Go to the audio section. And I think for this one, we are, well, okay, this environment window gets super confusing sometimes. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I looking at? Okay. We have a direct TDM instance right here with our native ES2 pad Now we're going to, oh yeah, that's the other thing I got to remember too is if you use Access Virus on Logic, you have to instantate an OMS connection for that. So this will be a good talking point real quick. All right. First of all, let's save our project, just in case things get weird and silly here. We could call this the Livestream Jungle track. So spool up a stereo instance here. Gotta pull up a Virus 1 plugin here. And so this is the Access Virus plugin that came from, this came out about 99-2000. This is a legit Access Virus running on a legit Motorola DSP chip on the TDM platform. This was actually one of the big reasons I wanted to build a TDM platform, is because if you have enough horsepower for it, you can theoretically run 64 instances of the Access Virus plugin. This is kind of like between Virus A and B. And you can basically use your TDM platform as one giant virtual analog synthesizer. And I'm running out of beer, but that's okay. Let's see what I got for sounds here. Percussion, I think we got, I know I saw somewhere in here I had an 808 sound. Don't ask me where, oh, it's under drums maybe. Okay, bass. See how this sounds real quick. Well, I mean, that sounds like a test program sine wave, not exactly 808 bass, but it's almost like I got too many options to shift through on this one. Oh, what's this one? And so before you can get this up and running, you need to, in your environment node, go to Options, Update OMS Equivalents. This will give it a MIDI routing via OMS, because it's basically, it's treating it like a, oh, what the crap. I just created a whole bunch of obnoxious things that we don't need. All right. Let's try that again. Don't think I had it selected correctly. No, it's not doing what I want. It's not what I want. Oh, there it is. Got it. All right. All right. Sorry for that confusion there. This is all still very new to all this, so bear with me here. We're going to spool up a new instrument. I'm kind of doing this like kind of in a sloppy fashion just because I'm trying to do this as quickly as we can. And we're going to select the Virus 1A like it's a hardware element within Logic. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So now we have, let's make sure we've properly labeled this so that we can find it here. Virus 1A. So you can spool up 8 instances per DSP chip at 16 notes polyphony. And so do the math, it's basically like that times 64 is the maximum amount of instances you can run. That's quite a bit of DSP power when you think about that. All within your in-the-box environment. So picture yourself 25 years ago having that capability. That's pretty impressive when you think about that. All right, I'm going to set this to our virus 1A, see if this works. Success, we are at least working on that front. Not sure how well this sound is going to work, but we're going to find that out in real time. So let's see what happens. I think we'll work with that. Just gotta quickly record that. Commands. Seems like we have some notes sticking somewhere in the system. Not sure what's going on with that. Might have to troubleshoot that later. And why it's drawing such a long file, couldn't tell you. Shorten this way, 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 way down. Set ourselves the 16th note, quantize. Let's see if we can work on that 808 bass. That sounds a little more like it, not as clicky. See how our system's performing real quick. So the only reason we're even seeing this amount of activity right now, this to me is like almost what I consider to be high activity on my setup right now. And that's because we're running ES2 in the background. If I was to take that out right now, let's just take that out real quick. So now we're using 0 computer power on the Mac right now. You see, that's because we're running that native side of things. We've unmute that first. So now ES2 is re-enabled. You can now see that we're actually consuming CPU power, not DSP power this. So eMagic a while back actually came out with their own TDM plugins, one of which was the ES1 plugin. Most people are familiar with the ES1, and if you look at the efficiency of what better way to demonstrate and to show you is I'm going to call up the ES1 plugin if I can. Oh, you know what? It needs to be a mono channel. Change that real quick. It's a mono plugin. So the Epic ES1 runs fully off the TDM platform, and then there is a basically like the host TDM one, where it's basically it runs off your CPU, but it's firmly like routed through TDM. It gets really weird and murky. So that's the native option. Let's load up a monophonic instance of ES1 into the DSP side of things. So this is now loaded in the DSP side. Now let me show you the difference here on DSP usage. The virus in its full 16-note polyphony state is only using 13% DSP. Our Epic ES1 in mono, one note at a time, is giving us the same DSP usage as the entire fully polyphonic virus plugin. I think would honestly use the virus in this case because it's so much more optimized for the DSP platform than the ES1 was. I just feel like that just speaks to how efficient the Access virus stuff was coded. And like others, like Analog Rich is mentioning, TC plugin or TC PowerCore had the same Access virus plugin. I think they even had the Indigo version. And I'm still looking for a way to acquire the Indigo version to work on OS 9. That's going to require finding an iLock in the wild with an authorization that will work on OS 9, and that's just like, that's going to be a thing if I can get that up and running. So in the meantime, we're using the tried and true original virus plugin. Add some stuff to the master bus real quick. And I'm thinking we're going to do some wave stuff. I'm thinking an L1 window. Actually, let's do master EQ. Let's do master EQ first. So we're going to do an EQ6. Try the Bomb Factory 1176. I'm just curious about this. And that really brought down the volume quite a bit. I'll have to do a bit of a deep dive on that one a bit later. Here's the famous L1 Plus maximizer. One thing to notice that these plugins run in 48-bit environments. Most native plugins were 32-bit because of the DSP nature. They actually operated at 48-bit, so that was a bit of an anomaly about the TDM platform. Let's see where our DSP usage is at. All the wave plugins we have running right now, they're all on this one DSP chip, and that So with all the Wave plugins right now, one of the big selling points of Waves at this time was being able to run multiple plugins on the same DSP chip. This was the revolution that Waves initially kicked off. And so that was a very new feature at the time. That's basically what made Waves an industry standard in the late 90s, was being able to do that. So we have about 3 to 4 instances of Waves TDM plugins running about 76% on one of these DSP chips. And we got plenty more room to load up plugins. We have 4 mix cards, and basically we're at a level here where we would need an expanded chassis to run all this. And that's maybe earlier in the live stream if you want to see what that looks like. I think the biggest thing I'm working on in these live streams is figuring out where my mic volume's at in relation to the music. So something I'm still working on. Thanks for pointing that out. I'm still working on that. Would you use the PS22 or other mono to stereo plugin on a Prophet 5 or 10 or mono synth? It'd be an interesting experiment. I'd have to turn on the Prophet 10, let it warm up. I should have done that before I started the live stream, so probably won't happen on this live stream. Now, the one thing I've been advised when it comes to working in TDM Pro Tools is anywhere you see red is a big no-no, so I'm actually going to bring this level down a bit. Someone I've talked to who has worked on Pro Tools TDM for a number of years has always advised that you never really want to exceed minus 10 in the Pro Tools environment when working in the box. And right now we're working in the box, and from what I can tell you is that I definitely notice a timbre difference when you're exceeding 10 decibels in this platform. So I'm also having to relearn my mix methodology. Typically what I do is I just route everything out of the box onto the desk. Then I'm really not worrying so much about that, but this is all very new to me. Doing nothing but reading these giant manuals on a routine basis, trying to figure things out. I think that we're going to wrap up the session here for today. I thank everyone who came to the show. Thanks for watching. I'm going to try to make timestamps of everything that we talked about here tonight so that you can come back to various parts of the show at leisure and not have to skim through the whole hour in your almost nearly 2-hour session trying to figure out where everything's at. So thank you once again for everyone who did come. Until next Thursday, we'll see you then. And hopefully I'll get to make it next Thursday. I might have to start a little bit later. That is pending. If there is, please join the Discord group. That's where I keep everyone up to date. And I'll try to find more places to keep everyone in the loop about upcoming shows. In the meantime, thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.